distinguished dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen. After listening to Mr. Santosh Hegde and Professor Patnaik, I don't have very much to add. And a good thing about being asked to speak at this time, it makes my life very easy. That said, let me introduce Transparency International to those of you who don't know much about this organization. Transparency International is a global coalition against corruption. It was started by some officials from the World Bank who were sick and tired of corruption in the World Bank projects. And Peter Eigen was the person who started it way back in 1993. We work in more than 100 countries. And India is, one chapter is in India. We are based in New Delhi. Transparency International is more popular for some of the research work that we do, although we also come up with a lot of anti-corruption tools which we try to promote. So let me begin with some statistics. For instance, Corruption Perception Index, which is the main research work of Transparency International, where we rank countries on the level of corruption. India ranks on 87th position out of 178 countries with an integrity score of 3.4 on a scale of 10, which means clean countries such as Denmark or Sweden, they have an integrity score of 9.4, 9.5. There is yet another survey done by Transparency International, which is called Bribe Pairs Index. This is to find out the supply side of corruption. So India ranks on 19th position out of 22 countries, which means we are a great nation when it comes to exporting bribery abroad. We do not believe in level playing field. When we do business abroad, we love to bribe lower-level government officials in order to sell our products. There is another survey done by Transparency International in India, which is called India Corruption Study. We did that in 2008 to study the extent of corruption in below poverty line sector. And we found that poor in India living below the poverty line sector paid rupees 9,000 million as bribe to avail basic and need-based services such as electricity, water supply, NREGS program, public distribution system, hospital services, school education, so on and so forth. 11 government services were surveyed. According to Global Corruption Barometer, which is basically a survey to find out what do common people in the country feel about corruption, which institution do they think is most corrupt? So no marks for guessing that. All of us would agree, perhaps, that politicians are considered to be most corrupt, according to Global Corruption Barometer, followed by our administrators. Earlier, private sector did not figure in this list, but now private sector figure very, very prominently in this list. Also, the media figures very prominently in this list. Judiciary is also something that figures prominently. So here I would, Professor Patnaik has already explained in great detail about corporate corruption, but it is very important that I also speak a little bit about corporate corruption, especially in the wake of the recent 2G spectrum scam. And we find that because we engage a lot with corporates, we find that corporates don't have clear-cut compliance program. They are only driven by profit motive, and when you try to achieve profit in any way, then you will try to get that by breaking rules, bribing officials, colluding with politicians, and what have you. Our report also shows that publicly listed companies around the world are far from demonstrating embedded anti-corruption practices in their operations. We had studied 5 companies in India, including 2 private sector, very important private sector companies, and we found that while they report high-level strategic commitment to prevent corruption, they do not always provide meaningful details on the support system required to meet such aims. The actual effectiveness of anti-bribery systems is distinct from mere reporting on their existence. That's true. Yet, it's very important that they show how they are trying to work on this, because such disclosures can be a strong indicator of the quality and comprehensiveness of a company's efforts to address bribery and corruption. Another point that I would like to touch upon here is the issue of black money that is stashed abroad in various banks. We at Transparency International have been fighting and talking to government about this. It's very difficult to tell exact amount of how much money is abroad, but according to GFI, Global Financial Integrity, a Washington-based NGO, they say that it's 468 billion US dollar is stashed abroad in various banks. The figure could be much more. We are not sure about that. But we feel that government, not enough effort has been made in this direction to recover the stolen assets. India has become a member of FATF and Egmont Group, but that's not enough. A lot more needs to be done in order to bring back black money from different tax havens situated abroad. So in the above scenario, what happens? The most imminent and the most obvious effect of corruption is that the poor become poorer and the rich become richer, while poor people don't have money to buy medicines, build schools, send children to schools. Whereas on other hand, we have people like the Ambanis living in 28-storied houses. So that is the level of, this is what corruption does. We also find the Maoist insurgents in India, which has increased in recent times, around 40,000 square kilometers across central and eastern India, is just one example of what globalization has done, what lack of compliance program, and how corporates have led to rising corruption. Money that could be spent on developing the social infrastructure, eradicating poverty, and empowering the poor actually goes into the hands of few individuals, making them richer. And all this talk about bridging the rich-poor divide, etc., will never happen, or perhaps it will take a lot of effort to bridge that. So companies, of course, they talk about corporate social responsibility, but our experience has been that very few companies would actually like to invest money, would actually spend their CSR money in improving governance. So that is something, it's not their priority at all. So what are the causes of corruption? Mr. Santosh Hegde has already talked about lack of political will to check corruption. I will only cite the recent example of what government did everything not to have an effective Lokpal. We all agree and we all believe that Lokpal will not really, it's not a solution to end corruption, but at least it is some deterrent factor, which is very important. It would provide some deterrent factor, and but government did everything not to have an effective Lokpal. First, they were in no mood to listen to the civil society organizations with a lot of pressure on them. They relented, they discussed the bill, then they decided to arrest Anna Hazare, then they debated in the parliament in which most of them criticized the bill. Then finally they made a parliamentary standing committee which has people like Lalu Yadav and Manish Tiwari and Amar Singh. So these are the members of the parliamentary standing committee which is debating, which is talking about Lokpal. Also, when Ramdev started talking about black money, while his way of doing it might not have been good, but at least it was such an important issue which has been buried once for all. Nobody is talking about bringing back black money from outside or preventing the outflow of money that is going out of the country. The second reason for rising corruption is lack of transparency and accountability in the government dealings. With great reluctance, with lot of pressure, RTI, right to information, was brought in, but how many people really know about right to information? We found our survey shows that less than 1% of people living below the poverty line sector in Bihar, for instance, they know about RTI. They don't even know what it is. So if there is not enough awareness about right to information, not much is going to be achieved. And then we have RTI activists who are getting killed. We all have heard about the Shahla Masood case of Madhya Pradesh, where an RTI activist who had sought a lot of information about a company called Rio Tinto, she was murdered recently. Social audit has been made compulsory in NREGS program, but does it really happen? We find when we work at the grassroots level, we find that people don't even show up for a social audit. It is conducted in a way which is so slipshod. So we know that not enough effort is being made for social audit, which is a great anti-corruption tool. Then we have weak anti-corruption agencies. There is too much political interference in the two main anti-corruption agencies that we have, CBI, Central Bureau of Investigation, which is a police body, too much interference from the politicians. Central Vigilance Commission, they can only recommend, and that is why social activists and anti-corruption fighters have been talking about bringing an effective Lokpal, because they feel that at least it will be some deterrent factor. Even if it is not able to eradicate corruption, there will be some step in the right direction. Then we have no desire to learn from international best practices. I would like to dwell a little bit about United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Transparency International has been promoting the ratification of UNCSC. United Nations Convention Against Corruption is the first convention that talks about checking corruption in a way where you talk about the private sector corruption. It talks about involving the civil society in anti-corruption efforts in the country, and it also talks about the recovery of stolen assets. Government of India was not willing to ratify UNCSC, although they have been a signatory for a long time. It was with a lot of international pressure and pressure from organizations such as ours that they finally ratified UNCSC. Very few people know about it. They have not talked enough about it. Even media has not reported widely about what will UNCSC lead to. UNCSC is a great program, but as always, the implementation part is something that has to be seen, and soon we will be doing a review of how government, although it has ratified, has it exactly implemented. How effective is the implementation of UNCSC? And UNCSC is very important because it also talks about the private sector corruption. Lack of ethics and value, not enough emphasis is being laid on this. A distinction has to be made between the need and the greed. We also find several times that people, Mr. Hegre talked about satisfaction and contentment, which is very important. We find that people find that it's a lot easier to bribe when you are in a particular situation. It's a lot easier to bribe in order to get your passport. It's a lot easier to bribe in order to get your driving license, because that's the easier way out. How long? We have to change this attitude, because if we continue with this attitude, we are not going to reach too far. So what are the efforts? What is the solution to all this? Right to information, a step in the right direction. More effort has to be made in order to make people more aware about right to information. Because of this great tool, a lot of skeletons are now tumbling out of the closets of a lot of people, of the politicians and bureaucrats. Social audit and citizens charter. For a long time, we have been promoting social audit and citizens charter, but again, not enough effort was being made. Lokpal talks, Jan Lokpal talks about citizens charter, but it is very important that we should know what should be the content of citizens charter. It is a great tool to make everything transparent and accountable. So we are trying to promote a citizens charter. E-governance is another very effective tool to check corruption. We have seen that how corruption has come down to some level in with computerization, digitalization of land records, and also in the railways. So e-governance is another great tool to check corruption. Importance of ethics and value in school education, that is something very important that has to be promoted. Teachers have to realize, parents have to realize that teaching ethics and value to school children is extremely important. Private sector, engaging with private sector, emphasizing that a good compliance program is very essential. That is another very important area to be looked into. Transparency International engages with corporates, both public sector companies and private sector companies. We have a program called Integrity Pact, which is a tool to check corruption in public procurement. We work very closely with Central Vigilance Commission. 40 public sector companies have adopted Integrity Pact. We are now monitoring whether they are implementing it in letter and spirit or it's just fig leaf. Private sector companies have slowly started showing interest. Initially, there was a lot of reluctance. Some state departments have shown interest. For instance, the Rural Development Department of Bihar has shown interest in adopting Integrity Pact in all their rural development program. There is another tool that we promote, which is called Development Pact. It is a tool to demand accountability and transparency from elected representatives and administration. What we do is just before election, we go to people in different constituencies, we ask them to prepare their development agenda, and just before election, we present the development agenda prepared by people to candidates from across the party line, and we say that as a token of your commitment to deliver on the development agenda prepared by people, put your signature. Some candidates refuse to do that, but our experience has shown at the panchayat level in Chhattisgarh, in Bihar, in Rajasthan, that those candidates who put a signature, they won the election. And then we set up a review committee where we monitor the progress, whether they are implementing, what are the priority areas for people, whether that is being implemented or not. So this is one way where you demand, where people of a constituency can demand transparency and accountability from their elected representatives and administrators. We also talk about recovery of stolen assets, the black money. We were talking about ratification of UNCAC, United Nations Convention Against Corruption. India has ratified it, but now we are seeing whether it is being implemented in letter and spirit or not. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity and listening to me. Thank you.